Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chase Life Podcast, episode 79. And I have a special guest on the show today, somebody who I know very, very well. I was going to say Emma Phillips, but Emma Phillips, welcome to the Chase Life Podcast. You've been one of my closest friends now for coming up to nearly 10 years. We spent 7 of those, I know, right? We've spent 7 of those years working together professionally, and obviously over that time, I think we were in each other's WhatsApps for many, many hours of those days. So we know each other very well. And the reason I wanted to bring Emma on the podcast today was because Emma is a specialist in hormonal health and skincare. And so I think when we age, for lack of better wording, particularly over the age of 35, a lot of shit starts to happen in our bodies. I have been through some changes myself. I'm going to be 40 this year. I know Emma's got her own story. So I wanted to bring Emma on to have a candid conversation as if we had a glass of wine in hand / cup of coffee, maybe both. Maybe it's espresso martinis. I don't know. We've had a few of those over the years as well. And just have a conversation around hormones and skincare and the link between the two and what we can be doing as 35-something-year-olds to improve our skincare, and especially our, the skin on our face and our skin overall, but particularly the skin on our face, because I think that's probably one of the biggest giveaways of a particular lifestyle, right?
100%. And as you and I have had many conversations about skincare over the years, it's a challenging time. It's not only do, after 35, your hormones start taking a kind of nosedive and lots of other things showing up, but often for many people, their skin will start playing havoc as well, which is just to add to the joys of the perimenopause array of symptoms that might show up.
So why don't we start talking about hormones? Like what particularly happens? I mean, I'm using a ballpark figure of 35 because I think that's when I suppose I started seeing changes in my skin and my hormones, probably about 38. But for a lot of people, it can happen a lot sooner than that. So what sort of age range would you, like in your experience of working with so many clients, that age range of where it just starts to tip over?
It does seem to be around the 35, although I see a lot of people that are much, much younger coming through, and sort of it is, whether it's the early stages of perimenopause or some form of hormonal shift, whether that's because they've had a child and then their hormones are in a different place. The way I kind of try to explaining it to people is when you first start your period as a child, they say on average it takes 10 years for those hormones to stabilize and you to find your perfect cycle. Now, sadly, what normally happens is at about 15, 16, the doctor shoves you on the pill, and that therefore blocks your normal hormone cycle. You never actually develop your natural cycle. So therefore, any issues you may have had hormonally start showing up again when you go in your period in reverse, which is the way I like to describe perimenopause. And it can take between 10 and 15 years from when it starts, sadly, to when you reach that final postmenopausal stage where you stop cycling, for your hormones to become, I suppose, the postmenopausal stage. So it is your hormones in reverse. And sadly, if you had the issues as a child when you first get your period, you will probably have the same issues as an adult showing up that may have been hidden by the pill.
Right. And so I'm turning 40 this year. You're a couple of years ahead of me with exactly the same birthday. Another thing that we're twinning on here. But I think, back in the day, I mean, I never had problems with PMS, but I do remember a lot of my school friends around 15, 16 having quite severe PMS, and the solution that doctors gave back then, and I don't know if they do the same now, is we'll just go on birth control. And it seems to be that birth control is just the band-aid rather than seeing sort of what's behind the scenes. And I know, I consult with women over the age of 30 now, who have got wildly uncontrolled PMS, and a lot of it comes from diet and lifestyle. So let's talk about diet and lifestyle, because that has such a huge effect on the hormones. I see so much late onset polycystic ovarian syndrome, later onset endometriosis, whether it's been misdiagnosed, a lot of these problems that are occurring, which not all of them are diet and lifestyle orientated. granted, but a lot of them are. And I think we are, as a nation, in complete denial about that.
Oh, I literally, amen. That's all I could say to that one. Is I don't really think it's the biggest issue I think we're having here is we're in a band-aid society. It's like there's a problem, let's put a band-aid over it. Let's not actually look at what the root cause is. And like, I almost hate that word, root cause of everything, but there is we live in this band-aid society. I'll pill for an ill from that side of it. And there's so much to be said about how you can optimize your lifestyle first. And then for sure, if you've still got those symptoms showing up, I guarantee they won't be as aggressively, but if you have those symptoms still showing up, then that's the time to seek, to look at what the alternatives are for help. And I think it goes back to when you're saying like the late onset of endometriosis and PCOS, is often that's been there from a child, and where they got put on the pill or where that sort of side of it is that symptom was never fixed as a child. So therefore, as soon as you come off that medication for it, guess what? It just comes and shows back up. But you and I sing on the same, hymn sheet for lifestyle is if you're getting shit sleep, if you're stressed out of your mind, guess what? Your hormones are going to go up the spout, as is your skin and your gut. So I guess it goes back to, for me, it's always looking at the holistic picture of what's actually going on in your lifestyle, to why your skin might be showing up these symptoms and why you might be having these issues showing up in your skin. First, addressing that alongside what's the right skincare for your face as well.
So let's talk about, these key pillars that we have, because I know, we talk about these a lot. We actually do them. We've done them for many, many years. But what would be the top sort of 4 to 5 pillars that, when you have somebody come into your practice, I'm not going to tell you mine because I know they're exactly the same, but for the benefit of everybody listening, what are the top sort of 4 to 5 things that you get somebody doing before you do prescribe any sort of skincare, any form of anything else? What are those lifestyle things that you have to address?
So ironically, just before we jumped on this podcast, I was doing a skin consult, and this girl was much, much younger, and her skin was out of nowhere, at 24, suddenly showing these crazy symptoms of spots, dry skin, and everything else like that. One of the first things I asked her was, how's your sleep right now? So sleep for me is the pinnacle of everything. And if you are not getting the right amount of sleep, it's going to have a knock-on effect on everything else. I know that there's going to be lots of people listening to this that have got children, that have got many things that affect their sleep, and it can be challenging at times. You and I have, I have a nearly 7-year-old now, so I have been through the sleep deprivation hell that there is, and that's one of the things that I see as the biggest problem for skin, hormones, gut health. Then I suppose we move on to the side of people getting outside more and actually bloody moving more, getting out the door. We live in a particularly, it's a bit different in Abu Dhabi, but in the UK, it's like this sedentary lifestyle that people are starting to live, where they basically get up. A lot of people work from home post-COVID, so they literally walk 10 meters from their bedroom to their office, and they sit in front of a computer all day long and barely leave the house and see any daylight, which I find staggeringly scary. And I know you and I have both worked with clients where we look at their movement for the day, and I find some of it quite staggeringly shocking, because I can't believe people move that little nowadays. Then I suppose we move on to the pillar for me of diet, is what this person is actually putting in their mouth, because that, believe me, plays a huge role on hormones and skin. You and I feel exactly the same about this, is the optimization of protein in people's diet is so key. Hormones for your skin, for everything, for generally not feeling like crap. If people just would optimize that one thing in their diet, they'd probably find that they felt a load better. And then I'm always going to bang on about it, and weight training is, for me, is such a critical thing to help with your hormone health. Over the age of 35, 40, these kind of hit crazy workouts, yes, you might love them and they might give you, but it's probably playing massive havoc on your stress and cortisol, your cortisol hormone, and that then can play detrimental on every other part of your life. So whereas I'm not saying don't run on the road for millions of miles if you like cardio and that side of it, for me, the place should be resistance training first, and then looking at where you can sprinkle in HIIT training and cardio around it for heart health. I don't know whether there's a different pillar I've missed than you or something.
I think that I guess because of the nature of what David and I do in working in behavioral change, I actually put emotional fitness up at the top, and managing your stress up at the top, which is an interesting one because I want to share a little experiment that I've been doing recently. So I've been wearing a CGM, so a continuous glucose monitor, over the past 3 days. And I thought I'd introduce it. Obviously, I've been struggling with pretty severe migraines over the past year or so. And like, obviously, I've kind of almost got to the bottom of that now. And it was really interesting, the fact that I would consider myself as pretty emotionally resilient. I'm pretty emotionally fit. I have to practice what I preach. I can handle stress and stressful situations really well. Shall I tell you the one thing that spiked my glucose more than anything else in my day? And I was sitting at my laptop at 7 p.m. at night writing fucking emails. I kid you not. I got this notification on my phone saying, we've noticed a glucose spike. I was like, are you fucking serious? I'm sat on my ass writing emails. And I genuinely, I really wasn't stressed. I mean, I have got a business that I love. I do work that I love. I really have, in touch wood, very little serious stress in my life right now. But that was quite interesting for me, noticing how my body responds to something that even I wasn't aware of. And I would say that I'm pretty aware of when, my body kind of feels a bit out, and, the hunger, energy and cravings, mood, sleep, we have to use these as biomarkers, but it was very interesting to see that for me. So if that's happening in my body, it's probably happening in other people's, or they're having interactions and they're not even aware of it. So one of the things that I've said to clients all along is, if you have that gut feeling, go with your gut feeling. If you're surrounding yourself with people, or let's talk about energy, because energy is a very important one. If you're in let's say an office environment, there's a very negative and very heavy energy, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to quit your job. But what it does mean is that you have to make sure that you know who you are, what you stand for, and where you're going in life. So your energy and your protection around your own vibe and your own energy is so strong that you can walk into any room and not basically have the life sucked out of you. And I think this is such a critical part of a body transformation. It's such a critical part of being happy. What do? I teach people how to be happy. So this is such a critical element to add into that, because if my blood glucose is fluctuating when I'm literally just sat at my laptop, in my home office here, and my blood glucose is rising, I'm actually going to test it again. I decided not to do it last night because I was coming out the back of a migraine. So I thought perhaps not the best time to test it, but I will test it again. And it's just been a really interesting experiment for me. So yeah, definitely to add to that, emotional fitness is the key. And I just wanted to kind of go back to what you were talking about weight training. Obviously, this is like our second love. We've both been lifting weights for many, many years. And I think the general story that I have seen is that a lot of women think that they need to be doing hard exercise in order to lose weight. And it's almost like a punishment system. Whereas if we look at weight training as a way to build your body, empower yourself, the stronger my female clients get, and I'm sure you see the same, the stronger they get in the gym, the less likely they want to be doing, high intensity cardio and all of that. Now, look, yes, for heart health, it is really important to do some form of cardio, but little sprinklings here and there, or periodized into your program. So for example, you might have, let's just say that you're doing 2 sessions of like high intensity a week. By the way, high intensity means no more than like 15 to 20 minutes. If we're doing these classes that are 60 minutes of, high intensity jumping around, look, anybody can be, right? My 4-year-old could tell me to do burpees for an hour. I'd be bloody tired. Does that mean I'm well trained? And the answer is no. And so so many of our clients are swimming in cortisol at the best of times.
Yeah.
And living on adrenaline. I mean, both of us, once again, something else that's similar, both former perfectionists, stress addicts, workaholics. Do you remember living in that vibe of just constant adrenaline? Because there was a part of me that actually kind of thrived on that, if I'm honest. It felt good. It felt like energized. but it's not a good place to live.
No. And I just think, you know, moving us back there, 100%, like completely miss the stress element of it, but that is such a havoc on people's skin as well. If people, and you know, it's also looking at what is going on in your life that could have caused your skin to flare up like it is, that, you know, you always have to be a detective of this. But guess what? When you weight train as well, your skin looks better. You know, it does. It looks tighter, it feels better. And I was training this morning, and after I did my sets, I was sat on my ass for a minute and a half, and it felt brilliant, rather than jumping around like a lunatic, putting my, you know, cortisol in the bin. And you and I have both had stages, and obviously we'll probably touch on this in terms of the story of where my hormones started going awry, where I was living in that constant state of stress and I was not coping at all. You and I had many phone calls where I was just like, I feel like I'm going insane. And everything else was a knock-on effects. So I think one thing I would say is, for me personally, and I know you feel the same, is when I feel strong and I can actually train properly, is I have a lot more resilience to be able to cope, versus if I was doing these crazy workouts. And I have been there, I have done that game of doing the crazy workouts, and I think we all have. My body can't cope with it now, basically. It just cannot cope in the same way.
I can't actually think of anything worse. I think I'm not sure I could even get through one workout, and if I did, then I would be struggling for days after.
And that's it.
One of the things I want to add on to this is you know, we talk about anti-aging and, you know, I don't want to say anti-aging, I think looking good for your age.
Yeah.
Because my dermatologist, Dr. Ruba, she's been on a podcast previously. One of the things that Ruba said to me the other day was, you know, Rachel, you're nearly 40 and, you know, you're just going to look good for your age. You're not going to look like you're 20 anymore.
Yeah.
and initially, and I love Ruba. And initially I was like, oh, but I want to kind of look like I'm 20. But the reality is that I would also look very weird if I did look like I was still 23, 24. But I think everything that we've just talked about is not just the pillar for health and the pillars for good skincare. It's actually the pillars to keep you young, vibrant, and energetic, because we've also both been through that phase of, you know, having babies, looking grey. I mean, I looked grey, right? With the sleep deprivation and everything else, and even with like loads of coats of fake tan on top and bleach blonde hair, I still looked grey. And so, like, I think this is probably where your story certainly picked up momentum, is after you had Hugo, right? So tell us about your story. How on earth did you end up here?
So, you know, I will still never, ever, ever forget that day of walking up to you in Carluccio's with a pregnancy test saying, you think I'm pregnant, with a pea stick, and you going, nah, you're fine, mate.
Oh my God. Okay. So let's just backtrack before we drop that bombshell on everybody. Emma and I, obviously, when I moved back to London, Emma and I then were doing face-to-face meetings instead of, you know, her working with me when I was in Australia. And then, you know, we enjoyed our marketing days together. And then, you know, Emma said, you know, I think my period's a little bit late. And next thing I know, she like gingerly walks towards me as we're sitting having lunch with this pea stick. And she said, I'm not sure what this means. And I was like, there's a faint pink line there. Pretty sure you're pregnant and you look like a ghost. I will never forget that day. And anyway, bless him, he's here and he's now 7. So yeah, tell us your story, because I think that's where it started.
Nah, you're fine. And then at the weekend I did one of those ones where it says pregnant. Yeah. So I'm not fine, mate. No. So I did the joyful thing, I suppose, with my skin, where actually I was similar to you. I had horrific pregnancy. I was pretty much sick from day Hugo was 2 weeks over. I was pretty much sick for all of it. So I looked fairly grey. My skin looked grey throughout my pregnancy. But after I had Hugo, my skin for about 6 months looked fucking amazing. So I was breastfeeding and I had all that estrogen surge. It was beautiful. And then when I stopped breastfeeding, or stopped breastfeeding as much, my skin started to look bizarre, shall we say. I started to get, you know, the pigmentation coming up on my face, dry bits, spots, all this stuff. And I was thinking, oh, this isn't good. And also you then start thinking, God, I look old. So that was the other thing I remember thinking. And I hadn't quite come to terms with the fact I was getting older as well. I think I was still thinking I was 20. And when I looked at this girl this morning, her skin is a 20-year-old skin. It's very different to my skin. My skin looks good for its age, but I'm 40, nearly 43. I don't have a 20, it's a bit like your doctor said, I don't have a 20-year-old skin, sadly, anymore. My skin looked terrible. And actually, when I look back at the pictures, and I obviously worked with someone you recommended to help me get the right skincare regime for my skin at that time, my skin is so much better now, nearly, 6-7 years on, than it was when I sent the photos to her. So anyway, that's a small digression on the skin part. But obviously, what happened to me was, post Hugo, hormones were great, did the whole year of I've breastfed for a year and felt pretty decent in that year. And then obviously when I stopped breastfeeding, that's when I started to sort of find things were showing up for me. So I was by this time, 37-ish, 38, started to feel a bit weird. I'd had the copper coil fitted, which I didn't really have any problems with. I wanted to do the non-hormonal thing. But for me, really, this was the first time that I was actually experiencing, I would say, natural cycling. Over the years, I'd been on various pills, various things. Again, I got put on pills when I was 15 for my skin because I had bad acne. So it was like, oh, she's got acne, give her the pill. Was on that for years, and various pills, over the years that you went on. And then obviously came off it for a while. As you know, I got told I couldn't get pregnant naturally, which basically meant that my progesterone wasn't showing up every month. And they did say I'd need intervention. So Hugo was a stark accident in that respect of wasn't expecting to be able to get pregnant naturally. So then it kind of, I suppose this is where my fascination of hormones started to come in, really, was I didn't really understand what was happening to me, but I knew I didn't feel particularly great every month. And as I started getting closer and closer to 40, it's what I was experiencing is I have very short cycles, which coincides with progesterone not showing up often. And I had many years of amenorrhea and stuff like that, which is down to my issues with eating and stuff when I was much younger. So I always had a weird, I suppose, I never had a regular period. I didn't have that classic 28-day cycle. I had a pill cycle, or I had a completely sporadic short cycle. Some months it was longer. So I didn't really know what my cycle was. And in hindsight, had all these wonderful apps been about when I was younger, this may have helped me. And I just started experiencing extreme anger and anxiety. Again, hadn't really connected the dots as to it being every month. And because my cycle was 21 days, it started to feel like it was pretty much all the bloody time. So like every month I was thinking, this is horrific. And obviously my poor husband, Ben, was suffering the aftermath. Basically at times like wanting, just not caring. And I think that was a weird experience for me, is I just didn't really understand what was happening.
I think if anybody knows you as well, that you're very you're generally very calm. There's no anger in you. You're not an angry person. You're not, I wouldn't say that you're an anxious person either. I mean, listen, you worked for me for 7 years and you dealt with all of my shit and how I operate, and you coped with that just fine. And so I wouldn't have said that you're either of those things, but did you find that, maybe that stuff was kind of underlying, but you sort of managed it quite well, and then all of a sudden, like these hormonal changes came in, and you said earlier you just felt like you'd lost your mind?
100%. And at the time, obviously, I was working. You didn't stress me out. You never stressed me out, actually. But I had another sort of, client in the health space that I was working with, and they were very stressful to me. And I wasn't, I was being put under a lot of pressure. And I certainly know that that's what a lot of people you work with is they do have a lot of external pressure from their career that's pushing down on them. So there is obviously, and then we had the joys of COVID as well, and all of that stress and bits and pieces. And when we started coming out of that, I was thinking, it surely is not right to be feeling this way. And nothing in my life was particularly wrong. And like you said, from a lifestyle point of view, everything was dialed in, everything was as optimized as it could be. And I was thinking, so why do I feel like shit? And then you start debating everything. You start thinking, am I unhappy? Am I this? Am I that? And I couldn't really put my finger on it, I suppose. I didn't really understand what was going on. And I actually think it was Ben that pointed out to me. He was like, hey, do you not see the pattern here? Do you not see that it's every time you're like due on that you try and sabotage our life or sabotage everything in your life? It was almost like I was trying to push a fuck it self-destruction button to see how much chaos I could cause. And then as soon as I came on my period, I almost had to spend the next 2 weeks apologizing for my behavior to everyone to try, and then it would come back again. And some months was better than others and managed better than others. And it was just this cycle of like, what the fuck is going on, basically? What is happening?
And you know, you've been training for a long time, so you're very aware of the changes that are happening to your body, and so this can still take you out like a 100%. Boulder. And you know, I remember the conversations that we were having, and I'm like, this is not like Emma at all, like not at all. And so obviously you're a Dutch test practitioner. We're going to talk about the Dutch test in a minute. So what was your first port of call? Did you go to a GP? Did you go straight to Newson Health? Like what was your step-by-step approach to try and get this sorted?
Well, I think the first thing was, you and I had many conversations, and I was like, I need to understand more about what's going on. I need to understand what's happening here. And you obviously, I was like, I want to study more. I want to understand and I remember saying to you, if I feel like this, God knows what other people don't when they haven't got, I slept quite well. There was all these other things that wasn't too bad. I was like, God knows what other women must be feeling like. So it was you that kind of pointed me in the direction of the kind of person to go and study with and sort of get that side of it. And then obviously, we talked about the Dutch before, and then I obviously went to a naturopath doctor in Canada, actually, because obviously I think they're very forward thinking with hormones and they're very down the naturopath. And I really wanted to try and do everything I could from a natural point of view first to try and get things dialed in. That was where my preference sat, was rather than going to the doctors and doing that whole, pill for an ill, getting shoved with a band-aid. I really wanted to understand what was happening to me, and to be able to use that to sort of help other people that I was working with as well. Because, to my clients and stuff, I just kept a level head. Apart from with you, I just definitely didn't keep a level head very often. So then obviously, I took the Dutch test, and as we expected, my progesterone was in the bin. But one of the other things that it really highlighted was my testosterone was completely in the bin. And I think, what was the word you used to me? Your testosterone was like something a squirrel.
I don't know. But I remember thinking, how do you, you must have no fight in you at all. Like your testosterone was literally like minus something. You were like like beyond in the bin. It had been like thrown out well in the trash many years ago probably, but you must have had no fight in you, no get up and go. You must have been like literally like a wet flannel just lying there
I think at times I was
like waiting to be zhushed up or something. But yeah, I was pretty shocked when I saw your Dutch results, and I was like, whoa, that testosterone is low. So yeah, you must have felt awful.
And I actually genuinely thought my testosterone would be pretty good, because I'm quite muscular, and I just genuinely thought that I held testosterone, that side of it. So that was a shock. And obviously no shock really was my cortisol patterns were crap. So basically my cortisol was up high as low as, basically again, like in the basement, when it should have been high to help you get up in the morning. And I was certainly experiencing that whole thing of, I'd wake up having had 8 hours sleep and still feel like I was literally a zombie. And I know you've had a similar experience with your cortisol pathway. Is it wasn't high when it should be high, and then it was quite high at night. So when I should be settling down for bed, my monkey brain was going off on one, basically.
Yeah.
So that was the first side of it. And actually the naturopath doctor I worked with was fantastic in Canada, and she really helped me first of all, find some key supplements. And I'm not a big fan of, supplements just for the sake of supplements. They've got to be used in the right way. I dialed in everything else, and she's, was very sure I dialed in everything else before we kind of played the supplement game. And there was obviously some key minerals, I think, missing from me. And I thought I'd covered them with my diet, but clearly not enough. And obviously I went on some therapeutic doses of some of sort of key vitamins and minerals, which hugely helps sort of, I suppose, calm me down. I was like, my PMS symptoms, not all the time, but a lot of the time, were significantly better. And then we kind of then did some check-ins and bits and pieces of that. And I just felt that after 6 months, I still didn't feel that I had a handle on things as well as I'd like. And I was like, I'm not sure I want to live like this. And that was when I went to Newson's Health and sort of said from a, what's the options of looking at HRT for me?
And it can be, those words, HRT, can be quite scary. I mean, I had Esther Bloom on the podcast about 3 episodes ago, and obviously she's very pro bioidentical hormones, when necessary and when appropriate. And I think, people like you and Esther, you guys, and obviously Louise Newson, and actually a lot more practitioners nowadays, doing such a great job of spreading the news that HRT is not going to give you breast cancer, it's not going to cause blood clots, etc., etc. That is old news. It is completely outdated. And there are different types of HRT now, and they can benefit women so much. And I really do think we have to get away from this stigma of, oh, well, HRT is bad for you and you should stay away from it, when actually what is bad for you is struggling through perimenopause and a menopause, having a physical and an emotional effect, not just on you, on your life, on your children, on your husband, on everything else. So when it comes to hormones and HRT, that's obviously the route then that you chose to go, right?
Yeah, and I did 6 months of it sort of supplement wise, and I did feel so much better, but I didn't feel like me. And I still felt quite, we'd done everything we could to try and raise up my testosterone, every type of one you could have tried, we've tried, and it just wasn't moving the needle. It just was not doing anything. So when I had that initial appointment, they were very happy to sort of, say, yeah, basically my progesterone just wasn't showing up every month. So that second calming hormone that comes in the second half of your cycle just generally wasn't showing up for me. So I started that initially. And then after 3 months, basically the estrogen, I still wasn't producing any testosterone. And that's when they said, yeah, okay, you're a good candidate. You're young, and, that sort of side of it. And that to me was the game changer one, because I still had a lot of anxiety. And maybe I had anxiety when I was as younger, and it kind of, because sometimes I feel like things that lay dormant in you as younger, what it does is just exasperates those feelings. So maybe I had, was an anxious person at times, and it just exasperated it, and I just didn't deal with it. But the anxiety was the lasting bit that I really couldn't let go of. And that certainly helped me wipe that out. I'm not saying everything's perfect and you get odd months where it's not, but for me personally, HRT was the right move, and I felt so much better and just generally so much stronger again, and everything else like that. But it's got a stigma attached to it. It's changing. But even I feel like it's like HRT, it makes you feel old. Like that was my initial gut reaction, is old. It's
so funny. It's so funny. One of my friends, Alison, she messaged me today and she said, oh, well, so how does it feel? Like, is this just, because we were talking about my migraines, and she said, well, is this perimenopause or is it just a hormonal imbalance? And I was like, well, she said, how do you feel about me saying perimenopause? I'm like, I don't really give a fuck, to be honest. I don't really, like, my date of birth might say 1983. I still, in my head and in my soul, believe that I'm 26 years old. And so I'm probably going to be, in my 80s and 90s, still at 26 years old. And so I do think that whilst there was certainly a couple of weeks ago when the P word was sort of mentioned about perimenopause and, HRT for migraines and all that kind of stuff, I did think, oh my God, but I don't feel that old. But I've kind of passed that now. And do you think it's one of those things that you just kind of get past, or it's just one of those things that still plays on the back of your mind that perhaps you're older than you actually feel.
There is a bit of both, but I mean, I think I remember listening to a podcast and it said, you know, and this is probably where I say it, is why would you want to live in the kind of basement of stuff when you could live in an optimal state? So obviously you can't fight the aging process, and nor should you. And I definitely agree with what you said, is look good for your age rather than trying to look 10 years younger than you are. Like, accept where you are and look the best you can be for your age. And a lot of the time, you know, sadly, you know, particularly here in the healthcare system, is when they look at biomarkers for health, it's often are you in pre-disease state? So are you going to cause the NHS money problems? If you're not, you're probably okay. You're in the satisfactory range. Whereas I don't want to play in the satisfactory range. I would like to play in the optimal range. And sadly, the optimal range is not what they want to diagnose you with. Yeah. And it breaks me when I see these people's biomarkers. I get the blood tests and I said, you know, get me a copy of the test. And they'll say satisfactory. And some of these hormones are sat literally in the basement of satisfactory. So it's like thinking of someone in a house and basically the person's lying in the basement and they get told they're fine. And they're not fine.
They've got a roof over their heads. That's not fine.
They're not fine. They're in a place where they feel like shit. Yeah. It's kind of like, but that little green marker was just tipping into the edge of being okay, so that then makes it fine. So, you know, mine was certainly in stages. It came quite aggressively as well. I would say that whether it was a knock-on effect of, you know, external stress and everything else like that, but obviously that's 100%, and that boils down to what you said right at the beginning, is my cortisol was absolutely out of whack, and then that was causing me to be almost crazy about everything else that was going on in my life and not coping very well. So poor Hugh. So that was a part of the reason as well, was I felt I was being horrible to my 5-year-olds at the time, and I couldn't cope with him being 5 a lot of the time. I just generally found, I mean, kids can be bloody annoying, to say.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, at 5, like, it's in the corners. So thank God you didn't go through this when he was like 2.5 to 3.5, because in my experience, 2.5 to 3.5. 2.5 to 3.5 is, in my experience of having my 2, the hardest time. You know, Amelie's just turned 3, and then all of a sudden the happiest baby in the world is all of a sudden saying no to absolutely everything. She went to nursery today with socks on and these ballet shoes, which are too big for her, and I put trainers in her bag. Lo and behold, I'm seeing photos of her at nursery. She's still got the bloody ballet shoes on. So, you know, I think you could count your lucky stars that Hugo was actually 5 and not 2.5 at the time.
Yeah, but you feel bad as a parent. And, you know, there's so many things, whether you're a parent or not, you'll start realizing that you're not being that great to your partner or people you're being around. And I wasn't present either, Rach. I don't know whether that's something you've experienced, but I was so caught up in my head that I wasn't present anymore. I was just kind of there sometimes.
Well, I definitely feel that's part of, you know, these inverted cortisol patterns, swimming in a sea of stress hormones, that inability, that feeling like the inability to cope. That's something that a lot of our clients talk about now. Listen, it was something that I felt when I was in, you know, in my worst stages of being a complete workaholic and a stress addict. It was the inability to cope. I mean, I certainly, you know, on the outside, everything looked fine and dandy, and, you know, the business was doing well. This is like 10, 12 years ago in Australia. But I mean, it was a hellhole. It was so stressful. Like I felt like inside I cannot cope, and I didn't seek out new opportunities. I turned down a lot of opportunities because of that feeling of I just can't cope. I had no children at the time. I had nobody to look after bar myself, and that was hard enough. And I think one of the most common things that I hear now when we have some really in-depth conversations with clients is I feel like I just can't cope, which is a really hard place to be. It's so isolating. It can feel very lonely, especially if you're a mother. You're the head of your household. You've probably got a very busy work environment, and then it's hardly an oasis when you come home because you've got 2 kids, you know, who are probably under the age of 10, who needs your attention, who needs their mummy. You've got a husband who you barely see, and you know, the idea of seeking help is just so overwhelming, but it doesn't need to be. You know, help is available. You know, you've got Emma in the UK, you've got Esther over in the States. Like if you need some some help, like either contact Emma or myself, and we'll get you some help. Like I've got a really amazing network of practitioners and health professionals that I work with. Emma takes care of all of the UK clients. So before we wrap up, I wanted to talk quickly about skincare, particularly around I know I'm like looking for an angle, because as usual with us, we go off on like many tangents and have those female conversations where we have 20 different things going at the same time. This is definitely a female skill, because if any men are listening to this right now, they're going, okay, so where's that conversation going anyway? So skincare now, top products for skincare, because I think everybody sort of has their own, but if there were only sort of 3 to 5 skincare products that you would recommend for any skin type, what would they be?
100% SPF. Like my ultimate thing is, if you want to protect your skin, if you want to have a decent skin barrier, and when I say skin barrier, I mean that's that protection you have for your skin, that when you go outside, it doesn't flush red, it doesn't go crazy, you don't find that it's massive vulnerability in your skin. Bloody please wear SPF. Like I actually have got to the point where I won't treat people unless if they come to me and they aren't prepared to wear SPF moving forward. I won't treat them and take them on as a client, because they will fuck up their skin. And most of the people I treat in the older age, most of the things probably could have been massively prevented if they'd worn SPF when they were younger. And I know it wasn't such a big thing when you get, when the person's 60, it wasn't, I've been very guilty of baby oiling my face when I was younger. So I definitely damaged my skin, shall we say. But SPF is my ultimate, regardless what type of skin. There is so many out there, that are amazing that you can use that for the different skin types. So,
and they don't have to be greasy either, because a lot of sunscreens, especially the SPF over 50, I use PCA Skin is my favorite. I've used quite a lot of them, but I like Alpha H, but my favorite is PCA Skin. I probably use that now for a good couple of years. However, there are some amazing brands. I really like that one because it's just a zinc, broad spectrum, not at all greasy. You can wear it under makeup. Your makeup doesn't slide off on top of it. And also, hot tip, because I learned this the hard way, make sure your SPF is completely dry before you put any other primers or foundations on top of it. If you want your makeup to stay all day, make sure that your SPF is dry. So sunscreen, number 1. What's number 2?
Oh, and don't use body sunscreen on your face, please, please, please.
No.
Don't use body sunscreen on your face. Get one for your fucking face. If your skin has any vulnerability at all, I would say niacinamide is a very good serum to use, and that is essentially B3. So that helps to repair any skin, or if you have any vulnerability in the barrier. As we get towards our age group, I'd say my other top 2 products are a decent vitamin C serum that I would use in the day, and then I like a retinol in the evening. I don't like people using retinol in the day because it makes them more vulnerable to the sun. So I like retinol to be used in the evening. And then basically I like a decent moisturizer in the evening that you wear overnight to help replenish your skin with hyaluronic acid in. Hyaluronic acid is my number 1 skincare for, ingredient, I suppose, for a moisturizer, because it basically holds 1,000 times its weight in water. It's what you have in your skin. And guess what? As you age, you get less of it. So you can replace that overnight. Your skin is going to look much better in the morning. I also like simplified skincare. I am not a big fan of these millions of products, because most of the time I see it ruining people's skin. I suppose, and then we're going to go, I don't know, I've done 4 or 5 here, but I do like a self-exfoliant. So depending on what skin type you have, an AHA, a BHA, or some form of basically what was going to eat that dead skin cells overnight to give you nice looking skin in the morning. Because when people have problems with their skin, when they have spots showing up and bits and pieces, it's always down to a trapped hair follicle. That's where a spot begins from. It's something where something's got trapped under the skin. It starts with a follicle, shows up, whether it's a whitehead, blackhead, cyst, it's a hair follicle in there that's caused it. If you can eradicate that ability for that hair follicle to become a spot by using a self-exfoliant, then that's going to make your skin a lot clearer.
Does that mean, okay, so very random question and something I know nothing about. Do we have hairy noses? Because don't know about everybody else listening to this, but if I look closely, I have like a couple of blackheads on my nose. Does that mean I have blocked hair follicles on my nose?
You've got hair all over you've got hair all over your face, and you and I are of that skin where we have blondie hair. So you may suffer from vellus hair, like vellus hairs, where I call it the peach fuzz that you get on the side of your face. Yeah, so bum fluff, essentially. So people that are fair tend to get bum fluff more than people that are dark. So this kind of vellus hair, that is all over your nose, and that is there. So that is where you get basically dirt trapped in what would be where a hair follicle is. So, and you know, everyone has blackheads on their nose. They do.
Yeah.
I look at people's faces very, very, very close up. There's always that sort of side where it's kind of like that dark bits on it. That's where I get them. But obviously, the more you can take away that dirt that's trapped in the skin, the better your skin is always going to look. No one has that perfect, flawless skin, no matter what they think. If you look closely at it, there's always some pores. There's always that side of it.
Absolutely. And I think we just don't see that side now, where we've got, you know, everything is
filtered and
airbrushed. And listen, like, we all want to look good. I'm sure you're standing in a good light right now, because I know I am.
Yeah, I picked the room that's got the best light. I haven't gone to the room that's got the shit light.
I know I'm not going to sit with my back towards the window, you know. So but at the same time, I think we have to, I mean, one of the things that I'm very passionate about, of course, is radical authenticity. I'm not going to, you know, we're having a conversation now over Zoom. There's, you know, this is what we look like. And I think sometimes, whilst, yes, it's fun to use filters if you want to use filters, but the reality is that you got to be happy with what you see in the mirror. And I think if that means prioritizing and investing in your skin, then you should do that. I invest a lot into my skin. It's very important to me. I know, Em, you feel the same, otherwise you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. You help women fall in love with their skin, and I help women how to be happy. And so, you know, combined, it is an investment. Your skin is an investment. You were saying earlier, the skin is one of your largest organs, or is it the largest organ?
It is the largest organ, and there's a lot of research that's currently going into kind of the skin-gut connection and how much that plays a role in people showing up with things like psoriasis, dandruff, you know, anything like acne and stuff. It could be hormonal, or it could also be coming from your gut. So you've got the microbiome in your gut, that if that's out of whack as well, guess what? That can show up on your skin. So sometimes we have to be that detective to work out, yes, okay, your skin is showing up with this all of a sudden. And it's frustrating when people get to perimenopause, because things like rosacea can suddenly come out of the woodworks, where you walk into a room and your skin flushes. And again, that is due to hormone changes. That is due to the fact that you've got your hormones going up and down like a yo-yo. Acne, again, you start to lose that progesterone, and the people that suffered with acne when they're younger often will find that it suddenly comes back in there, and that sucks. You know, when you're in your 40s and you suddenly got bloody acne back like you were a child. Yeah, that's not fun for anyone.
I think, you know, the microbiome, I think over the next 5 years, we're going to learn a lot more about the microbiome. Obviously, it's a big thing in functional medicine. 100%. I think a lot of traditional medics have, in my experience, boo-hooed a lot to do with the gut and the microbiome and its effects on skin. I think we're going to learn a lot more over the coming 5 years. I just don't think we can dismiss it. I think it does play a big part. I certainly know if you do a GI map, you can look at the gut. You can actually look at the markers in the microbiome. I don't know too much about that, but I was briefly chatting to Esther about it. So, you know, it would definitely be something to look into. Do you do gut testing as well with your clients? Yeah,
so we do gut testing and also hair trace mineral analysis. And it's amazing what you can actually find out from the strand of hair. So this is where, and again, it's such a game to play, is what people think sometimes is a hormone imbalance or a gut imbalance can sometimes be a mineral imbalance. And that, you know, there's so many things you have to kind of rule out, because if someone's calcium is high, guess what? The symptoms show up just like they are in perimenopause. So it's kind of looking at many angles to see, yes, you can make some intelligent assumptions based on someone's age, someone's diet, and all of that side of it as well. But someone's got H. pylori bashing around their gut, which is basically a bacteria, and that starts showing up on their face and starts showing up on all of that other things. That's got to be eradicated before you can start saying, are these symptoms perimenopause?
I think
So
this is the thing I love about functional medicine. You know, we look at, let's just take a hair mineral analysis. You can have mercury toxicity, which is actually throwing your thyroid off. And so you could go and get your thyroid tested, and you could have like very high reverse T3 levels, as an example. But why? And I think that's the thing that, you know, functional medicine is about looking at the root cause in inverted commas. But, you know, as I was talking to one of my doctor friends about this, and he's a functional medicine practitioner, and he said, you know, the thing is with functional medicine, it's got the other side as well, that if you continue to test and test and test, you're always going to find something.
100%.
So whilst, yes, it's great to know these things, a lot of the time, as long as you feel good, your energy is good, then you don't really need to go looking for this stuff. Because I think a lot of people also get, and I know I did when I started out functional medicine, really getting sucked down that route of, okay, well, what else is wrong? What else? And of course, like, what else can I test? How much more money can I throw at this and find out about myself? But the reality is that you don't really need to know, unless something obviously that then becomes, symptomatic.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I'm not a fan of testing for the sake of testing and bits and pieces. No. Sometimes it boils down to that sort of thing of, right, okay, we've eradicated everything else, we need to look at it. But I suppose what women have got to remember is when, and Esther talks about this brilliantly on her podcast, and recently one she did with Dutch, is when our ovaries go into retirement, so when they decide, okay, we're not having periods anymore, you're in postmenopause, you've got to remember that the hormones that start taking over are your thyroid and your adrenals. So you have to make sure you are looking after, guess what, your stress and everything else that plays alongside that, because they're the hormones that are taking over and helping you operate when you're postmenopausal. So
it's all intertwined. It's all so fascinating. So I'm going to wrap this up here, because otherwise we're going to continue talking for hours and hours and hours. Maybe there's a part 2 to this. Maybe we can tell some stories about our holidays to Marbella.
Maybe they should remain some stories.
Yeah. Maybe they should remain in the vault. So if people want to reach out to you, obviously your Instagram handle is @themetabolic_female. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. And have you got your website up and running yet? Because I say yes because it's been years in the making, I know, but it's kind of like chopped and changed.
It's there, but it's mainly at the moment my sort of listing is what I offer from that side of it. So yes, if you go to the metabolicfemale.co.uk, you'll see all the services I have to offer, and obviously, I work alongside you with the UK clients, so anyone that needs help from that side of it, reach out to you, and obviously we put in touch, and we obviously work very closely to look at that side of it.
Yeah. So ladies, if you need any help, either reach out to me or to Emma. I'm Athletic Fox on Instagram. Emma is @themetabolic_female. I'll also put all the details in the show notes, including Emma's direct email address. Just to let you know, we do also have our private client incubator, getting my words out, private client incubator still available for you to work with myself and David. So if you're interested in that, again, please shoot me a DM on Instagram @athleticfox, or you can send me an email. Again, I'll put it in the show notes. So that is it from me. That is it from Emma. Ciao for now, and see you next time.